This episode of RealAg Radio is brought to you by high-performing new Carbine insecticide from FMC. Carbine insecticide delivers fast, selective, and extended control of aphids in alfalfa and pulses, leaving beneficials like lady beetles to help in the fight. Ask your retailer today.
It's time for RealAg Radio on Rural Radio Channel 147 on Sirius XM. RealAg Radio and RealAgriculture.com is your home for insight and analysis of the issues that are impacting your farm business. Let's get real and get connected with RealAg Radio. Welcome to RealAg Radio here on Rural Radio 147, Sirius XM. Shaun Haney, your host here on this Friday edition of the show. It's Good Friday. Happy Easter to everybody out there listening, no matter where you are in Canada, the U.S., or beyond. And I really appreciate you making RealAg Radio and Rural Radio 147 a part of your day. Big shout out to everybody listening out there on the RealAg Radio podcast. Well, hey, it is Good Friday, but we still have a show here for you today. We're going to hear from Kelvin Heppner and Lyndsey Smith of RealAgriculture, and we're going to break down some of the biggest issues that are ongoing from this week. So we're going to talk about what's happening in terms of chicken fast food restaurants looking for different size birds, and they're being currently provided by the marketplace. What does that mean from an economic standpoint? We got some new jobs numbers in Canada. Of course, Mother Nature continues to just be like a treacherous torturer for some of us that are waiting for spring to begin or in the middle of calving season. We got the CPTPP looking to add the UK, Canadian beef and pork groups, not happy about that. And also a dog has died of avian influenza in Ontario, which is, to me, sounds kind of concerning. When we talk about the spread, and people, keep your dog on a leash. It's important. Lyndsey, I know, has some thoughts on that today on the program. If you have any feedback on today's show, we would love to hear from you. Send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. You can always find us on social media across all the different platforms, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and TikTok. Or you can call the RealAg feedback line. Would love to hear from you on what your thoughts, opinions, commentary, speculation, maybe some further questions that you have on any topic we discuss here on this show. Love to have that two-way communication with the audience. It's not just about what I have to say or what the people I'm interviewing have to say. We want to hear from you, the audience, as well. You can do that by calling 855-776-6147. And press the number 3 when you dial that number, and you leave me a voicemail. Okay, let's take a break. When we come back, we're going to get started with the RealAg Issues Panel. I've even got a surprise here, some Easter questions to weave in today's discussion, because it is a bit of a special day when it comes to holidays in the calendar year, a big holiday for many people in this audience. We'll be right back on RealAg Radio right after this. It's now time for a product spotlight with Alpine, and we're joined by Steve McQueen. Steve, talk about Alpine BioK.
What it does for us is it allows us to increase metabolism within the plant. Using the acetate, how it enters into the energy basis within the plant. Not only does potassium increase ATP energy, but the acetic acid, the acetate itself, allows that plant to pick up a metabolism, which will increase the ability for plants to exudate into the soil, and in turn allow plants to use the nutrients from the soil and move them much more efficiently within the plant. We increase the microbial activity in the soils, and we know that it's a food source for them. And when you energize the soils and the microbials, you then take advantage of your compost, your manures, your dry fertilizer programs. And what we're able to do is just create a synergy, upregulate the plant, and we can use the nutrients to their utmost efficiencies.
Hey, Steve, if somebody wants more information, where do they go?
www.alpine.com or contact the DSM all across Canada.
Farming is one of the most demanding jobs in the world, which is why farmers deserve an advantage, the Pride Seeds Advantage. For maximum yield, tonnage, and return on investment, get best-in-class seed genetics together with industry-leading traits and seed treatment protection. Plus, you can work directly with the Pride Seeds team to get personal agronomy guidance and products designed to help you take full advantage of your seed's genetic potential. Visit your local dealer today or visit prideseeds.com to learn more.
Let's get going with RealAg Issues Panel. But first, I'm going to tell you about Grow More, Risk Less. Realize greater yield potential and address zinc deficiency while improving soil health. Soleos Zinc delivers ROI, return on investment you can count on, and is backed with a product guarantee. Try it today. Learn more at soleos.com. That's SOILEOS.com. Soleos.com. Let's bring in the panel. We got lots to chat about here on this Good Friday. Kelvin, Good Friday to you, brother.
Thank you. Happy Easter, everyone. Yeah, it's Good Friday. It's certainly, we always spend like a month celebrating Christmas, and to me, Easter is probably a more significant holiday faith-wise. So, it's certainly a special day for many people, or a significant day.
Very, very, very cool. Good points. Okay, Lyndsey, how are you doing? Lyndsey Smith out of Ottawa, Ontario.
I'm doing well. I got to host the Farmer Rapid Fire yesterday. We had a ridiculous storm come through, but we made it. Everything is a mud pile now, and it's all good.
Yeah, you know what? Up yours, Mother Nature. This is crazy.
and it's like so widespread, right? Like so many amazing images and just not nice. It's April, you guys. It's April.
Well, we've seen here in the last 2 weeks, we've seen the tornadoes that rip through parts of Iowa. Mm-hmm. We know all about what we have seen in the past and will see this year in terms of like hurricane damage. Kelvin, you shared some photos of the heavy snowfall collapsing. I think it was a barn, the roof or a shop. Weather can be so destructive. Like it's unbelievable. It's scary.
Especially kind of out of season now, at least here in southern Manitoba, North Dakota, Minnesota, we've been hit like Lyndsey's part of Ontario. We were hit with storms this week as well. And the snow at this time of year is just way heavier and damaging than and slippery on the roads and everything. So, machine shed, saw a friend's machine shed went down as well. Had a family member's pig barn, part of the hog barn roof came down this last night as well. So it is dangerous and precarious at this time of year. The snow was added up all winter and it started melting, and then we get this big heavy snowfall that we saw this week. So yeah, hopefully this is the last of it. I'm not sure. I'm not sure we want to take any more at this point of the year.
I think in Calgary, I think May is actually our heaviest snowfall month on volume. So we're never out of it, Kelvin. We're in Canada.
But somewhere it's got to get warmer.
Calgary special.
Yeah, exactly.
I will never forget one year with Big Valley Jamboree and it snowed. That's August long weekend. Yeah, a little bit early.
Yeah. A
little bit early.
And we're not calving. I can't imagine some of the calving scenarios that people are going through right now.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, like that storm that came up towards you through, I think it was a Colorado low, and so it came up through the Dakotas. Like, people trying to calve when they've seen, I think some of the, like, say 30 centimeters of snow, 50 mile an hour winds. That's just, it's like mission impossible. People tend to think a lot about the weather from the standpoint of, will farmers have enough moisture or too much moisture, flooding versus drought? But specifically to this time, it's really about people that are calving and have that livestock outside with those newborn calves that it's difficult to keep them alive. That's a good point, Kelvin.
Again, it's kind of when it's out of season. If it was the middle of January and we had this kind of snow, we'd say, oh, this is normal. But I was looking through some of the memories in terms of my social media of the past few years, and most years there's no snow or hardly any. There's just snow in the tree lines at this time of year, never mind a major blizzard. So, but it's also not unprecedented either. You go back to 1997, we had a big snowfall right at this time of year that led to major flooding in the Red River Valley here in North Dakota and Manitoba. So it has been seen before.
Yeah. So, Lyndsey, is weather going to get better out there in Eastern Canada next week?
Well, I guess it depends on if you believe weather outlooks. So we've sort of been teased with the weather improving, 10 days out for a couple rounds now. So it does look like we are in for the official start of warm weather. And I mean like double digits. And certainly like in the southern part of Ontario, they've had that. I mean, way down Chatham, Kent, that sort of thing. It's been 18, 19. But that is, that's the banana belt. But even here in Ottawa, they're calling for, 15, 16, 18 degrees maybe next week. So the concern there, even for here, yes, is we have a lot of snow still. We just got all this ice. We've got a lot of water. The ground's still frozen. So overland flooding and generalized flooding is a concern here as well. We're not far from a couple rivers. It happened in 2019 and again in 2020. So it's a concern for sure. And I will say our creek is up there, and our biggest battle right now and for the next week is going to be mud. It is gross out there. So
Red River Valley, Kelvin, Lyndsey brings up flooding. There's got to be major concerns. Is there not in your area?
There are some concerns. Yeah, of course, a lot of the infrastructure and yards are built to withstand a fairly high level of water in this part of the world because it is a regular kind of routine thing. But yeah, the forecast right now, Environment Canada is forecasting a high of 18 one day next week. I'm not sure it'll actually get that high with how much snow we have and how white the ground is still. But if things warm up that fast, there's a ton of snow, not only here in Manitoba, north of the border, but you get into Grand Forks and Fargo, a lot of anecdotal reports about the depth of snow there. And if that all melts real quickly, that will lead to overland flooding. And I guess we'll have to see how severe it is. On a silver lining there might be that the geese and the ducks don't land and they just keep flying north if it warms up that quickly. And maybe we can avoid some of the avian influenza scenarios in Minnesota and Manitoba here.
Yeah, no kidding. So it was interesting yesterday. I was on a call with Dr. James Tansey and also John Gazlowski. We're doing a pest and predator podcast. And one of the things that they brought up is one of the misconceptions out there when it comes to, say, grasshopper populations for the year ahead in Western Canada, people may assume that all of this snow, the cold weather, maybe we've broken that cycle and it's going to help us when it comes to something like grasshoppers. And they actually said, no, that is not the case. Or flea beetles as well. What may help us with flea beetles is the fact that, we got some moisture, we launch out of the ground. Kelvin, you've mentioned that warmer soil once we get started here because we're not seeding so early. That may help us, but in terms of breaking the population, that's not actually what tends to happen. So that wasn't what I wanted to hear. I was hoping they were going to say the opposite, but that's
lots to be determined in the next month here in terms of this season.
Yeah, no kidding. Okay, let's get into economics jobs report. We get some 35,000 new jobs, Kelvin, announced by StatsCan. I guess we'll look at this as a positive as we see unemployment still hovering around that 5%.
Yeah, 35,000, another significant increase. And one thing that caught my attention from the StatsCan report this week is that these job gains were primarily in the private sector. A lot of the job creation over the last couple of years has been in government, in public jobs, and these were largely in private, in transportation, warehousing, building and other support services, finance, real estate. They all saw increases while jobs were lost in construction and natural resources, which I don't know. I'm not sure how much to read into that on a month-by-month basis. That's always the thing with these reports. How much do we read into a month, 1 month kind of sample here? But average hourly wages rose 5.3% on an annual basis. So that will make the Bank of Canada's effort tougher to combat inflation. And in general, this tight labor market isn't going to be conducive for the inflation battle that Bank of Canada and other central banks continue to fight.
We're in the
Lyndsey, clearly still difficult for people to find people to work. It's a tight market.
Yeah, I was just going to say, first segment and we got to inflation right away, Kelvin. I like hats off to you. But so, I mean, that I guess is my question. So first of all, when we talk about, the Bank of Canada pausing rates, we talk about, is inflation coming down? But then we've got this incredibly strong jobs market, and we are hearing some of the housing markets are heating back up again. So yes, there's some seasonality to that, right? It's spring, it does tend to pick up now, but we're hearing reports that some of the major urban centers that pullback has essentially stalled out, and we're back to, things selling for more than asking, or bidding wars, those sorts of things. So what does that mean for inflationary pressure? For sure. But yes, the labor front, anybody who doesn't have their crews sort of lined up for the busy seeding season or throughout the year, the greenhouses, of course, here in Ontario, it is still a huge challenge to find everything from, labor all the way through to the C-suite, for sure.
It's going to be interesting, because I think one of the factors there on that point, Lyndsey, is that there's a lot of narrative out there that we could see a faster rate of acceleration of rates coming down in the back half of the year, early 2024. And so I wonder if on that housing stuff, that's kind of a factor here. People sort of front running what the potentially could happen, and I think that plays into people's minds too. Kelvin, what do you think?
Yeah, I do think that's potentially part of the equation here, but I think overall it's not that different from the farmland scenario, where there's just demand doesn't have to be that strong. Supply is just so tight that that even if there's just a few people that are looking to upgrade on house or that kind of thing, or they've moved to Canada and they are looking to buy that first make that investment in a home, you don't need real strong demand if supply is almost non-existent. Like, that's kind of the same thing we've seen in the farmland market in many parts of the country. So I think I'm not sure how far interest rates have to go to actually really cause things to slow down. It's, again, similar story to the farmland market.
Okay, we got more to chat about here on the RealAg Issues Panel here on this Good Friday edition of RealAg Radio. We'll be right back right after this.
As you head out into the field this season, the Corn School's got you covered. Everything from tillage discussions, weed control info, field trial results, yield strategies, and more. The Corn School on RealAgriculture.com has the information and advice you need to help you succeed. Brought to you by Pride Seeds and BASF. Corn School episodes are available at cornschool.com, from RealAgriculture.com, or as a podcast from your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
We are right here on the trade show floor at Commodity Classic. We got a product spotlight with Exotic, and right now we're talking to Tom Trigano. Tom, what does Invita do?
So Invita is a nitrogen-fixing bacteria that can fix nitrogen in all kinds of different crops. So beyond corn, which is the main focus for us, but we can fix nitrogen in everything from wheat to soybeans, and even some of the high-value crops like potatoes and sugar beets. What's unique about it is it fixes nitrogen right inside the cells of the plant. So we're not talking about, it's not inside the roots, so it's a foliar or an in-furrow application, and it gets basically systemic from the leaves to the roots, which gives the guys a lot of flexibility on how they use it.
If growers are interested in Invita from Exotic, where do they find it?
Best place to go is to talk to your local retailer. Another way to contact us is through our website, www.azotic-na.com.
And welcome back to RealAg Radio. Shaun Haney, Lyndsey Smith, Kelvin Heppner, all of RealAgriculture. And this segment is brought to you by Heads Up Seed Treatment. Protect your beans from rhizotonia root rot, white mold, and STS with Heads Up. Visit your nearest Agromart location or visit headsupst.com to learn more. Okay, let's, here's a hard-hitting one. It is Good Friday today. Easter eggs. Now, this is a real big tradition. It is a lot of fun, and the Easter Bunny is quite generous. But, Kelvin, here's what's interesting. Some people are looking for the Easter Bunny. Tends to look for substitutes in some cases. What's exactly happening here? We're no longer talking about eggs. We're looking at potatoes.
Apparently the Easter Bunny's on a budget and eggs are too expensive. I'm not sure, or at least they were earlier in the year. And so I think that drove some, there were some people that made some memes on social media about Easter egg hunts having to be canceled due to not having eggs, or jokingly replacing them with potatoes. And according to some reporting by Axios today, Potatoes USA, the national marketing board for U.S. potato growers and importers, has hopped on this trend and is having some fun with it and using the hashtag Easter potatoes. Jokingly, I think in some ways, maybe not all in every case, but replacing eggs with potatoes, painting potatoes. And I think if you use the right paint, you can actually throw them in the pot and boil and mash them and have them for your Easter dinner.
Why not? You would need a bigger basket though as a kid, because those potatoes would probably weigh down the basket more so than those eggs. So that's a concern you need to think about logistically, Lyndsey.
Well, it is, but I think this is brilliant. And honestly, I think I might try it. But of course, now it's sort of, I got to use what's in my cupboard because of course we're running out of time here. But now I'm thinking like, which is the best potato to use for a potato hunt?
Do you peel it first? Do you shape it like an egg?
Well, you'd have to sort of look, but the ones that are shaped more like eggs have rougher skin, and I'm thinking the paint would be hard. Anyway, this is fascinating to me, and I think it's a great idea, and I'm pretty sure that I support this, and if the Easter Bunny wants to try this at my house, I am like 2 thumbs up. I will film reactions for y'all, and we'll see how it goes, because this is so much fun.
We're going to next year be painting turkey legs?
Okay, we could. Are we going to have turkey legs?
I think turkeys aren't going to be cheaper than
Yeah, turkey might be more expensive. It all depends on how the spring and the fall goes for avian influenza. Anyway, I just love how, and if the potato marketing people here in Canada, maybe it's a little late this year, but like file this away for next year, and I would market this next year. I think it's a great idea. Imagine how much fun.
Well, you know what? I think you're weird for thinking it's weird.
That is a fantastic.
That's a great
fantastic marketing.
That's an egg marketing campaign. That's a good connection there, Shaun.
Yeah, I would like to point out that Kelvin used hopping on the trend.
Yeah,
on this one.
That was not intended, but I see how it worked out. Yeah,
I think it was intended.
That wasn't intended. Come on. You know what you did.
Lyndsey's the pun. Lyndsey wins the pun count every time.
I do. I really enjoy them. Okay. Anyway, hard-hitting news. Potatoes instead of eggs. I love it.
Do your kids get super excited about the Easter hunt?
Well, Charlie is 5, almost 6, and so she is pumped. Like, she woke up and was like, just a few more sleeps. Like, she is like counting down. The older 2 are like, just, give me chocolate. They don't care. So we'll have fun.
Our kids had a snow day this week, and they spent most of that snow day planning not only the Easter egg hunt, but the the Easter carnival that we are going to have as soon as we're done here.
Oh,
did you know you were having an Easter carnival?
Well, they've been preparing for it the last few days, but I didn't know before that. No, and so I think there's an Easter egg hunt, and that's a big part of that, but some other games as well.
While we're into this topic, very, very important. Is your Easter egg hunt? Does the Easter Bunny hide those eggs inside or outside?
All depends on the weather. This year is an inside year.
Yeah, this year is an inside year. That's for darn sure. But yes, it all comes down to whether or not there's grass. Yeah.
I enjoy the outdoor.
Yeah,
I find there's a little bit more challenge to it, right? But you've got to define the playing area. Like, how far can the kids go to try to find these eggs that the Easter Bunny has? Because the Easter Bunny, he can be a little bit up to no good sometimes and be a little tricky and like be challenging to some of those older kids in the family. And it's fun.
But if you use potatoes and one gets missed, it just becomes a new potato plant for next year. So I see how this potato thing really works.
It really goes far?
It just keeps going.
You mean if you plant an egg, you don't get a chicken?
Calvin's the expert on that one. I assume that's how it works, but I don't know.
You can put it in. Yeah, you can definitely get a chicken out of an egg. That's the whole idea.
But not in the ground.
not if you bury it.
Well, not in the ground, but in an incubator.
In an incubator, sure. Or in a nest.
Or back in the hen's nest. Yeah.
What kind of information are we sharing with these kids?
Yeah.
Okay. Speaking of chicken, Kelvin, I want you to explain this Wall Street Journal story. There is how does this go here? So there's growing popularity of crispy chicken sandwiches that has left restaurants chasing a relatively rare bird. small chickens. Restaurant companies, including KFC and Chick-fil-A, have come to prize chickens that weigh about 4 pounds, a slimmer bird that the big-breasted varieties that have become common to dominate the U.S. chicken industry. So, Kelvin, talk about the difference between the kind of birds they've been using versus what they're now seeking.
As far as I know, it's the same bird. It's just the number of days that it's raised before being processed because of what the intended use is. And so some of these uses, such as the crispy chicken sandwich, they're looking for smaller birds. It's a better fit in terms of what they're looking for a product. And so some of this just has to do with supply and demand of what they're, exactly. Like you get different size birds for different types of uses, whether you want wings or whether you want the whole roast bird for your Easter dinner. It's a different size chicken. And so some of this just has to do with that signal to the market and producers, of course, whether you're feeding them X number of days or a week longer to reach that larger bird size. That's what needs to be determined here. And I'm not sure some of this reporting that we saw this week made it sound like there were two different types of birds. I'm pretty sure it's just the same basic genetic streams. It's just the number of days and amount of feed that they require to be raised.
Well, here's the nuts. Here's the case. Go ahead, Lyndsey. Then I got.
Well, I was just going to say, but it is. I mean, chickens are so incredibly efficient at growing. To Kelvin's point, like if the market demands, something a little smaller, a little bigger, whatever, I'm just thinking about how precise that needs to be to actually deliver on that, and to get that market signal back to actual producers. To do that is just like my mind is spinning a little bit and trying to make it all happen.
Well, and
so kind of fascinating.
To tie this with our earlier discussion about weather, an example here in Manitoba, when we have a winter storm come through, a multi-day blizzard, those birds end up going, like the producer can't ship those birds in the middle of a blizzard, so they end up staying for a couple days longer, and they're often over the target weight by the time they get to the plant. And so things like that factor into the size of the birds at the plant and ultimately what they're used for.
Mm-hmm. So the story continues. Chicken suppliers such as Tyson, Pilgrim's Pride, and Wayne Sanderson Farms have been hesitant to produce the smaller chicken over the years because the birds are less profitable than larger ones that produce more meat per bird, according to poultry executives and industry analysts. The cost to produce a 4-pound bird and an 8-pound bird are similar, but when chicken prices go up, the larger, meatier bird is more lucrative for processors, said Tom Elam, president of Farm Econ LLC, an agricultural consulting firm. So there's the nuts and bolts money side of the equation that will create some resistance to change as well, I guess.
Yeah, ultimately it comes back to what is the demand and what is the willingness to pay from the restaurants that want to buy the smaller chicken. They're going to have to pay a little bit more because of the higher cost per pound of that meat or cost per bird.
Lyndsey's just wishing that there was like a hot, cheap sandwich that would take off at some of these places.
No, we don't. Well, okay, in the States maybe, but in Canada, we don't need more lamb demand. We can't meet the demand that we have. But I really didn't think we'd ever be talking about overall carcass weights in chicken like we would in beef and lamb. So, and I throw lamb in there just because I can. But it's pretty amazing to think that we'd be talking carcass weights and the profitability and cutout, let's say, of chicken.
We can get into meat to egg ratio and all of those technical things too, Lyndsey, if you want.
We really could. Not on this show. Next week. Next week sometime.
That's next week's program? Okay.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think so.
So now, speaking of avian influenza, it was mentioned a couple times here. This sounds very concerning. I don't understand all the science is spreading and all, but a dog has died from avian influenza in Ontario. How big of a deal is this, Lyndsey?
So it's a very big deal, and it's a very big deal for a few reasons. In that we really very well and truly want to protect our poultry, and that is already difficult with avian influenza happening in the migratory birds. And so we have biosecurity and all those sorts of things. But we also, in general, want to reduce any sort of movement between species of any of these viruses. We also want to, of course, keep our pets safe. And so what has happened here in Ontario is, and we're waiting for, final confirmation of some things, but there was a dog that a few days before it died had been chewing on a dead goose near Oshawa and was tested and found to have the avian influenza pathogen. So this is a really serious thing, but also perhaps not, right? In that this isn't about avian influenza suddenly spreading to, new species or anything like that. We have seen avian influenza in mammal species in the wild, but it does bring up another level of caution that obviously if you've got, these gathering places where the migratory birds are landing, so ponds and pools and these sorts of things in neighborhoods, there is the risk that pets could be potentially picking up this pathogen. And that does, of course, just bring up that extra level of obviously threats to pets, but we just want to try to keep this from ever getting to humans, which we know it can happen for people in very close proximity to poultry. So it's concerning. It's not, end of the world concerning, but anytime we're having that infection happening into a new species is a concern for sure. So yes, we have a lot of alerts here in Ontario of keeping your dogs on a leash. Don't let them chew on or gnaw on dead birds. If you find dead birds, you're supposed to call them in, not touch them, all of those things.
Well, I broke one of the fundamental rules is when the border crossing agent asks you a question, don't ask, why do you want to know that? I did that a couple of months ago. Don't do that. Yeah, do not anyway, do that. It was related to this. So I was crossing from Alberta into Montana, and the agent asked me if I had any raw poultry and beef. It was raw, uncooked is how he put it. And I said, I don't, but why?
Which you should not have done.
I shouldn't have done that. No, don't do that. Advise against it. And he gave me a very stern response back. There was some sarcasm involved. But anyway, have you not heard about avian flu, is how he put it. And I said, oh, I've heard of avian influenza. Yep, for sure. He's like, well, we've had three bears die in the park here. So, there's another example of where people very, very concerned. And that's a good question to ask. Don't get me wrong. I shouldn't have asked why. He's asking a good question. I'm just being, curious, and that's where curiosity killed the cat. This is this avian influenza thing. It continues to really create issues, not only for producers, but the overall poultry supply, as we've been discussing with chicken and poultry. For sure. Hey, let's take a break. When we come back, we've got more here on RealAg Radio on Good Friday right after this.
If you grow soy or edible beans in Ontario, you know that Sclerotinia white mold is no joke. Yield loss can be devastating, and timing fungicides can be complicated, but did you know there's a new seed treatment that can help mitigate yield loss? Start the year off with your best foot forward against disease. Ask your seed supplier or local Agrimart group to pre-treat your beans with Heads Up. Part of a complete white mold management plan, ask your seed dealer about Heads Up today or visit headsupst.com.
How's your seed quality? What should you treat with? What about herbicide carryover and environmental concerns? Spring is here, and you've got a lot of things to think about in regards to your pulse crop. The Pulse School on Real Agriculture has information and advice for all these questions and more to help you navigate this season. Brought to you by BASF. Pulse School episodes are available at pulseschool.com, realagriculture.com, or as a podcast on your favorite streaming service. Download the latest episode today.
Whether you're seeding, harvesting, or anything in between, the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com has you covered. Timely agronomic information from industry experts available online anytime. Give your wheat crop a good start and a great finish with the Wheat School on RealAgriculture.com. Brought to you by C&M Seeds, Syngenta Canada, and the Alberta Wheat and Barley Commission.
Welcome back to RealAg Radio for the RealAg Issues Panel. This segment's brought to you by Granubor from US Borax. Ask for it by name. Go to borax.com. Well, hey, during the commercial break, the producer of today's show, Trish, my wife, had sent me a text message, and she's got a good one for the panelists. At what point, Lyndsey, should the Easter Bunny should be like a cease and desist and say, like, you Easter Bunny, maybe you don't need to focus on our house. The kids, they're old enough.
That is a fabulous question. So I suppose now in your case, Shaun and producer Trish, your children are very close in age. And so it was probably an easier call to make. In my case, and perhaps somewhat in Kelvin's because he has so many children, they're spread out over a larger age gap. And so it's going to be a while for our house. And I will say, and I'll be honest, I feel like Trish could be one of these moms who, the adult kids come home and they still get an Easter basket.
Oh,
I'm just saying. Yeah. I'm just saying it could happen, right? So I would say probably, I thought so. I would say probably somewhere in the early teens. But yeah, that's what I'm going to go with. Kelvin, I'll throw to you with your gaggle of children.
First of all, I'll rebut your comment with it's not that many kids.
It's four.
It's four. Yeah.
I have
Twins
three.
included.
It's not that many more.
Yeah.
Which, Kelvin, is statistically quite significant.
Yeah, that's true.
Maybe versus the average. Yeah, whatever the average is these days. But I would raise, Lyndsey's saying mid-teens. I think like mid-40s. As long as Grandma wants to keep offering Easter baskets, I'll keep taking them.
All right. We now know.
Yeah.
Okay. Kelvin still wants the Easter basket. Okay. Writing that down.
In your house, are there Easter presents? Because some families do that, where there's actually Easter gifts.
Yeah.
That's more what I'm thinking. Or it's usually maybe a small box with like some mini eggs and whatever. Some other.
Yeah, see, I'm trying to think back, and to Kelvin's point, I grew up in a house where Easter was certainly a big deal for church and those sorts of things, and so we often certainly would receive usually something like a stuffy or some sort of little basket gift thing for quite some time actually. So yeah, but here the Easter Bunny just brings a lot of sugar. That's the sum total of it.
I'd compare it to a stocking stuffer kind of gifts is what we do at our place for Easter.
Okay,
that's fair.
That's
fair. I was in Rome one time during Easter.
And did you go to church?
No, I was there for school. We were on our high school trip.
Oh.
Yeah, it was very cool.
Probably smart not to take high school kids to a church at Easter. I'll be honest.
No, I was telling, actually, we were having supper with our youngest, Carson. He's in grade 12. We were telling him I was telling him stories from my high school European trip. Mm-hmm. Much different than the trip that kids would go on today.
How so? What would be the biggest difference?
We're going to go there now.
We're having a very family-oriented show today.
Probably the lack of supervision. So we had two great, the vice principal with two schools went together, two local schools from rival towns. And the vice principal from each school were the chaperones, we'll call them that. And they at times were more a part of the party than the actual chaperones. You can see where this is kind of going. Mm-hmm. I remember, I'll never forget this. And my favorite city in the world is London, England. Yeah, I love London. I love British history. And I was fortunate to be back there this past October on a trip with Trish to go visit her brother. And I remember on the school trip, we landed at Heathrow at like 10 in the morning, checked into our hotel. So we're talking like 1 p.m. We had a group meeting, and the two chaperones, two vice principals, taught us how to use the tube and said, be back by midnight.
Wow.
The city of London is your oyster. And so we took advantage of that.
That would not fly now. Yeah, that would not fly.
Could you imagine what would happen if that happened now?
A little bit of freedom like that, I think it would be a good thing for us to allow our kids to have. But some of the risks maybe are maybe different, perceived differently than they were at least then. The other comment I would have is we didn't have cell phones with cameras and video capability at that point. So some of those things maybe these days would be captured on camera and put on social media. And yeah, we know where that gets people in trouble too.
Good point. Good point. You're making sense there. Absolutely. Okay. Oh, those are good times, though. Okay, now we have heard from the Canadian Pork Council and the Canadian Cattle Association, two protein groups representing a lot of producers across this country, very upset about the UK potentially joining the CPTPP. Now, not that part. It's not the fact the UK wants to get in. The issue is how the UK wants to treat non-tariff trade barriers and prevent the UK consumer from accessing Canadian pork and beef. Lyndsey, this is it's going to be interesting because it's so unusual from what we usually hear from these groups. They're usually pushing for ratification of these trade deals. And this is an example where there's sort of the shoes on the other foot, and we're going to hear a bit of a different response from them.
Well, and it certainly is going to be interesting to exactly that, have export dependent and pro-export commodities standing up and saying, we don't want this deal, or we need a different deal for us to support this. But yes, we've got some issues, as you said, with the restrictions or the wording or the things that the UK is sort of sticking on. And the sense I get, and Shaun, you've done a lot of the interviews, so correct me if I'm wrong, but the sense I get is, and some of the issues are such like, it's a detail in the text that maybe got missed a little bit, like sort of glazed over. But the implications of it are actually quite huge. So for pork, it could potentially keep pork from being able to be brought into the UK, which means there's no benefit to the pork industry for the UK joining the CPTPP. And then with beef, it's one particular issue with how we handle carcasses, and that could keep beef out of the UK. So I think this is a point of where, and I think it was René Roy with the CPC that basically said, like, we know this is very specific to our industry, but it really matters. So we need to get the wording right so that everybody benefits from this trade deal. So that's not just a one-way street. It's supposed to be back and forth.
Yeah, I said earlier this week, Kelvin, there's probably some people listening to this show from somewhere else in the world, like say the US, and saying, oh, this is rich, Canada. This is rich. We have been trying to export dairy products into your country because we have market access numbers agreed to, and the way that you're allocating the tariff rate quotas is preventing us from doing so. New Zealand and the US have been saying that. And now you're claiming somebody else is doing it to you. Too bad. Is that a fair response from some of our trading partners?
Potentially, but I think every country has those sensitive areas, and every country has things that they're trying to protect. And this would be one where cattle producers certainly haven't, going back to the Canada-EU trade deal, is Canada and the UK currently have this interim trade agreement in place. It's basically the terms of the Canada-EU, the CETA arrangement, were just transferred to the UK when Brexit happened. And so that means that we're seeing imports of British beef into Canada every year, and last year exports of Canadian beef to the to the UK were zero. There was no Canadian beef that went there because of this non-tariff barrier. So I think there's just a mismatch in terms of I guess the people benefiting versus the people not benefiting from these trade deals, and that's where Canadian Cattle Association, Canadian Pork Council are looking to get that addressed. And I'm curious about the political process that has to unfold here. So the UK has reached an agreement with the CPTPP countries to join, but each country, from what I understand, has to ratify domestically. And so that means the Liberals will have to bring forward legislation at some point and have that go through Parliament. So do the NDP and the Conservatives, we have a minority government, of course, with the Liberals. So that means either the NDP, Conservatives, or Bloc have to support this. If it's a standalone bill, I'm curious whether the Conservatives, given the Canadian Cattle Association and Canadian Pork Council's opposition to the terms that have been agreed to here, I wonder how this plays out politically and whether this moves ahead or whether it has to be tucked into some other omnibus legislation where there's a confidence vote tied to it, that type of thing.
Yeah. And I need to spend more time because I need to understand which industries in Canada are the big winners when it comes to having the UK join the CPTPP.
So, and Canada was actually one of the the press release from Minister Ng's office last week when this was announced indicated that Canada was the first proponent. Like at the CPTPP table, Canada was, I believe, the loudest voice in favor of having the UK join. So there is, I'm not sure what is driving that. That's a good question, Shaun, in terms of where that pressure incentive is being found.
Well, and here's kind of the other, here's another thing that's sort of, and these are the things I think about. I know I need to think about other things, but there's a lot of criticism right now in the U.S. from U.S. farm groups towards the trade policy of the Biden administration and USTR Catherine Tai. They are much more focused right now on enforcement of current trade deals than, say, signing new deals, and that's fallen under some criticism. Okay, now in Canada, it seems like you could argue we're kind of maybe doing the opposite. And now we have farm groups criticizing the government and trade negotiators for not enforcing some of the things that are in the CETA deal and repeating that bad decision when it comes to the UK and the CPTPP deal. And so there's an interesting parallel difference there that I find kind of fascinating, to be honest with you. Does that make sense to either of you?
Yeah, and although I guess my question is, does this support your argument for Canada having a trade czar, or does it work against it?
Well, I think we need one.
Mm-hmm.
We do. We definitely. You want to pull the string on that one, don't you? No, I think it very much fits into this narrative because these are the things that we're not working on. We're like it sounds. I think this falls very much in line with how we have approached trade. When you talk to some of the people that are in the trade bubble, is that we're interested in promoting the idea of the UK being in the CPTPP and look at all the opportunities for Canadian products. What we're not interested in is the granular detail of that and how we actually make that happen. Promotion versus execution. There's a big difference there. Kelvin, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree. I do think Canada does have capacity to try to enforce things. An example would be the request for technical consultations with Mexico right now on the GM corn issue and the glyphosate issue with Mexico. Canada has requested technical consultations, kind of the first step towards enforcement of USMCA or CUSMA terms there potentially if it goes that far. But I do know what you mean. There's one thing is, it's one thing to have the press conference and the signing ceremony and all of that, but it's a completely different thing to actually activate and execute on that market access that is in the press release.
I keep on referring to that. I need to pull the clip of John Stackhouse from RBC saying Canada, in order to be successful going forward, has to be hyper focused on trade. And they need to get T-shirts made of that with John's face and the saying.
The problem is leverage, though. Canada often doesn't have enough leverage. That's where we need the WTO or some multilateral rules-based system with the referee to enforce rules. Canada doesn't always have leverage to bully its way into other countries forcing rules, like some other countries do.
Also, good point. Let's take a break. We'll be right back here on RealAg Radio. It's the Good Friday edition. We'll be right back right after this.
If farmers know one thing to be true, it's this. There are a lot of factors you can't control. The weather, breakdowns, and a million other variables standing between you and a successful season. But for all the uncertainty, you wouldn't change a thing, because that's farming. And that's why Koch Agronomic Services wants to make life on the farm a bit more predictable. From nutrient management and protection to seed enhancement, get the confidence of being in control. Visit kochagsolutions.com.
Canola is more than just a pretty face in the prairie landscape. It's a big business, both here and around the world, that requires you to be informed and up to date on everything it takes to grow a successful crop. The Canola School on RealAgriculture.com has an expert library of video resources covering markets, agronomy, and more to help you grow a healthy and profitable canola crop. Visit canolaschool.com today. Brought to you by BASF Canada and Invigor Hybrid Canola.
This segment of RealAg Radio is brought to you by Koch Agronomic Services, creators of Anvil Nitrogen Stabilizer. Defend against volatilization, boost efficiency, accomplish more, learn more about Anvil and other nutrient management, nutrient protection, and seed enhancement solutions at cokeagronomicservices.ca. One of the biggest feel-good stories of the week is the fact that we have astronauts going back to orbit the moon for the first time since the early 70s, which is hard to believe. And what's really cool, Lyndsey, is one of those 4 astronauts is going to be a Canadian that grew up on a farm in southwestern Ontario. Pretty awesome stuff.
Oh, it is really cool. And actually, so his name escapes me right now. So Kelvin, help me out.
Jeremy Hansen.
That's it. I was like, it starts with a J. Jeremy Hansen grew up on a farm, then moved to Ingersoll, I believe, so London area. As soon as we heard the news of which Canadian astronaut, because it was a pick of 4, which was going to orbit the moon, instantly everybody is like, what's his background, all these sorts of things. And it is pretty cool to think that, growing up on a farm all the way to the moon, it's pretty neat. And so you look through what he was doing. I also would like to point out that at 16, he had got, I think, his pilot's license. Like, this guy has been he's been a go-getter since day one. So I'm not entirely surprised that this is what he's doing. But it's as someone from Ontario, as people from farms, it's kind of neat to see how far you can go. And so pretty cool.
What caught my eye, the town he grew up in, or the farm, was located near Ailsa Craig, I believe, right? And don't we have a farmer on the Farmer Rapid Fire who's from Ailsa Craig?
We do.
Steve Twinestra.
Yeah, there you go.
Cowboy.
Yeah, that's true. And
I never say the town name right. And he always gives me a hard time.
Exactly, and I think that's why it caught my eye, because I'm pretty sure I remember, I've struggled with the name too.
I tend to say Elisa. It's not. It's Elsa. Yeah. Elsa? So I say it wrong.
He corrects me every time, but I never get it. I actually think that I say it right, and Steve just wants to give me a hard time.
That's entirely possible.
That is, I think, what goes on.
Ask him about his buddy Jeremy, though. Maybe we can chat with Jeremy next time.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Well, I've actually been to Steve's farm, to be honest with you. It's one of the very first farms I ever visited when I went to southwestern Ontario for the first time in 2010.
Cool.
Well, look at that.
Yep.
Okay.
And maybe I shouldn't say buddy. Maybe they were high school rivals. I don't know. But
imagine. We're just fabricating all sorts of things.
This is hard-hitting stuff. Okay, yeah. I want to finish up. It is the Masters this weekend, which is, I know what I'm doing on Sunday. Do we have any picks? Does anybody have a favorite that they're cheering for in this year's Masters, as we watch some of the most spectacular TV coverage that one can ever see on TV? Kelvin, who are you picking?
Well, probably my brain would go with Scotty Scheffler, the repeat winner. I watched a bit of that Netflix documentary, that Netflix show, and seems to be a likable guy. I watched a couple episodes. I didn't finish the show, so I'll leave it at that.
Oh, you got bored?
Maybe a little bit. But I think we also need to cheer for the guy from Ontario, right? Corey Connors. Listowel.
He won last week.
Another small town Ontario boy. Also a Toronto Maple Leafs fan.
Stuart Skinner.
There you go. Another Farmer Rapid Fire connection.
Perth County.
There you go. So what's he ranked? I believe he's is he in the 30s overall in terms of PGA rankings right now?
Well, Corey Connors is he's cool to watch, because it is how everybody that hacks it up on the weekend as a weekend warrior wishes they could swing. He doesn't even look like he's like Fred Couples. He doesn't look like he's trying. It's unbelievable how smooth his swing is.
Yeah.
So,
and this is also the anniversary of Mike Weir, right? The only Canadian to win the Masters, I believe it is.
Well, I'm broadcasting here from Vegas, so I was down at the sports book yesterday teaching my youngest how to do some sports gambling, and we bet $20 on Mackenzie Hughes, who was 250 to 1 and not doing so well. So that was dad showing his kid how not to bet. Lyndsey, who are you picking?
Oh my gosh. Okay, so I'm so glad you came around to me, because first of all, let's clarify, we're talking about golf. I have no idea who's even playing. I was going to guess Tiger, but I didn't even know if Tiger Woods was playing. Apparently he is. But I would just like to state for the record that golf, Chris said this the other day, golf is a pasture walk ruined because there's no livestock. So to play on the whole ruining a good walk, it is a pasture walk ruined because there's no livestock. I have zero interest in golf. Had no idea it was even on.
I gotta find new panelists. This is crazy. You know,
we're not helping your dream of hosting a sports show here, Shaun.
I can support a lot of other sports, but golf.
I may have to have Chip Flory as a panelist in the future.
Okay,
him and I can just talk about sports.
Lyndsey, we can talk about curling next time.
I love curling.
Stop it.
Curling.
Hey, Vic. Okay. Hey, everybody, have yourself a great Easter weekend. Really appreciate you tuning into the show. If you have any feedback, send me an email, shaney@realagriculture.com. Or, of course, you can call the RealAg feedback line, 855-776-6147. Thanks so much for getting real and getting connected with RealAg Radio. And we will, of course, chat again next week. Cheers, everybody.
Thank you for downloading this episode of RealAg Radio, brought to you by high-performing new carbine insecticide from FMC. New carbine insecticide hits aphids hard with effective, selective, and extended control. It also has activity on ligas and tarnished plant bugs. Ask your retailer today.